Okay, I think we'll go ahead and get started. I want to let everybody know that I was recently elected the treasurer of the La Plata County Democrats, and I've decided that I just didn't have enough time to be the chair of the Club Luncheon Committee. So Karen Pontius has agreed to take that on, and she'll be running the meeting today. I'd like to thank everybody on the club committee for all the work that they put in, and all of you who come to these things, because obviously there wouldn't be much point in doing it if we didn't have people who were interested in the topics that we're doing. So I'm going to turn it over to Karen. Karen, go ahead.
All right. Thanks for attending our La Plata County Democrats Club Luncheon. I hope you have lunch with you or something. And we're looking to move in person sometime maybe next year. Well, let's hope. The goal of the club is to bring together all Democrats from the most conservative to the most progressive to celebrate our shared values, appreciate who we are, and to work together to put more Democrats in office. I'd like to mention our club luncheon sponsor, that's Albrechta and Albrechta Law Firm. They've been supporting this lunch for several years now. If you need legal help, please think about Albrechta and Albrechta here in Durango. Our program today will feature Chuck Stevens, La Plata County Manager. And the procedure here is everyone is asked to stay muted except for the speakers, myself, and Gwen Unger, who will be handling questions. If you want to submit a question during the luncheon, please use the chat feature on Zoom. Please don't unmute yourself and speak. Send your questions to everyone in the chat window, and Gwen will pick it up and ask it. So if you're having trouble with your internet connectivity, you may want to disable your video. Audio only works better on slower connections. This Zoom meeting is being recorded and will be available within a day or so for viewing at laplatadem's.org. You can choose speaker mode, which is in the upper right corner of your screen where it says view. That way the speaker will have a big box and everybody else will be on the side. I would like to encourage everyone to donate to the La Plata County Dems this election year. Monthly donations are particularly appreciated, and you can set those up on ActBlue. Monthly donations make it easy for you to give to the party with relatively little pain. This is our 7th club luncheon for 2022. The committee is working hard to bring some great programs for this year. We're still working on our speaker for September, but we expect to have another very interesting program. I put stuff in the chat up at the top. I have tonight at 6 o'clock. If you can join us via Zoom, there's a link to get the link. There's a link to get the link. Yes, that sounds weird. And then the La Plata Dems Roosevelt Gala is the 26th of August at 5:30. That's a Friday night. And that'll be a great big event. It's our big fundraiser for the year. And the next club lunch is September 6th. So I'll also mention these announcements at the end of the meeting too. If you have any other announcements to make, put it in the chat window and we'll recognize you at the end. So to introduce Chuck Stevens, he currently serves as the La Plata County Manager. He's assumed that role in January of 2019. Stevens previously served as the Assistant County Manager since October 2017. Prior to that, he was Applications Manager in the county's Information Technology Department. Before joining the La Plata County teams, he served the United States Marine Corps with distinction for 25 years. Following his retirement from active duty, he served in the Marine Corps additional 3 years as a federal government civilian. As a senior leader in the Marine Corps, Stevens managed complex organizations and supervised large numbers of staff in a variety of roles. He was recognized as a top tech executive by San Diego Magazine for providing innovative leadership and has also been honored as the Distance Education Instructor of the Year for the Marine Corps College of Distance Education and Training. Chuck is a Leadership La Plata alumni, class of 2018, and he's also a board member for the Lake Durango Water Authority. He currently resides in Hesperus. Please welcome La Plata County Manager Chuck Stevens.
Hi. Well, thank you. Okay. I'll tell you, it's been a long time since I've done this on Zoom. I've gotten used to being back in person, so forgive me if I'm a little rusty with the Zoom protocols. But thank you very much, Gwen, for the invitation and Karen for the introduction. And thank all of you. I mean, this is great. I appreciate the opportunity to provide updates on the county and all the great work that our county employees are doing. I have an authorized structure of about 421 employees this year. Unfortunately, we're feeling the pinch when it comes to getting people to come to work, just like everybody else is across all industry right now. So I have about 41 vacancies in the county. So my on-hand strength right now is about 382 people on any given day. And I can tell you that every single one of them is an extremely dedicated and committed professional that truly cares about serving the residents of La Plata County. And it's an honor to hold this position and serve as your county manager. So thank you again for the invitation. I do appreciate this opportunity. If it's okay with you, and maybe you can reply in the chat, I just have kind of a laundry list of things that is kind of top of mind. What are the things that the commissioners are leaning on me and the staff right now? You know, what are those things that are most important to the board? And I have a list of topics. I can present them here to you in no particular order, and maybe you can just put in the chat what you'd like to have me speak to first. That way I can ensure that if I have a little bit of a priority list, I can cover the topics that you want me to cover. So normally when I head out to the community and you know, speak at events like this, I talk about a handful of things. So our land use code, that was obviously a very interesting conversation that we had over a number of years. Affordable housing, our homeless situation in Purple Cliffs, and especially now with the imminent closure of Purple Cliffs. Our ARPA funds, the American Rescue Plan Act funds, our County Code Chapter 90, this is the oil and gas regulations, and then the radar, the regional Southwest Regional Radar Project. Those are the things that I usually talk about. And then depending on questions, that can take anywhere from, you know, an hour to 75 minutes. And then, you know, we can go from there. So I see one item in the chat. And then I see a question about the strategic plan. Okay, not on my list, Roy, but I will add that. I can give you an update on that as well. Okay. Okay, well, let's start then. I think I can take, why don't I just take those in the order, and then radar. Okay, all right, good to see you. Dick White, former mayor, haven't seen you probably since you left the council. So good to see you online, and then the homeless cap. Okay, so looks like the topics you're interested are my usual playlist. Hey, good to see you, sir. All right, so let's start with, I think it was water was the first one, right? Water and affordable housing. So as you know, a couple of years ago, the Board of County Commissioners did establish their water priorities, and that was good. They had a group of interested stakeholders and professionals, technical experts from the field came together. They were the Water Advisory Committee. They came together and addressed different policy questions, and then came back to the board with different recommendations. And so as a part of our land use code that was adopted, the water regulations were also adopted. So that's a big step, because now we have codified water regulations, and also in our land use code, we have parameters that are established. So when there is a development and somebody wants to do a new development, it's very clear now what they have to prove, because when you're doing land use in the unincorporated county, you have to prove a couple of things for all projects, unless it's a use by right, like a residence is a use by right on any piece of land that you own. But if you're going to do development, you typically have to prove water, sewer, access, and then compatibility. And so when we say you have to prove water, that usually means two things, depending on the size and the scope of the development. You have to prove wet water, and then you have to prove paper water. So paper water means, do you have a legal right and access to that water? And so you have to establish that you have a right to whatever water you're proposing to use for that development. And then again, depending on the size and the scope of the development, you might have to do a well test or a pump test to demonstrate that the water that you're going to use is of sufficient quantity. So those are the two things that have been incorporated and codified now, and are very quantifiable within our land use code. Now, within the county, and I think this probably is more of what you're looking for, is what is the board's interest in, and what are they doing to ensure safe quality drinking water for all of our residents. That's probably more what you're getting to. The board absolutely has this at the top of their list, and it's a concern, especially as we see. I don't even know that it's fair to call it drought anymore, because when you're in decades long periods of drought, it's actually our new normal in all likelihood. Last time I had a meeting with the Southwestern Conservation water folks, they referred to it as the aridification of the Southwest. Wow. Which means that's a pretty scary word, because I think it means like this is our normal now. And so water use and water management is definitely got to be on the forefront when you're thinking about anything, whether it's individual land use development or on the larger scale. What are we doing as a county? So the board definitely has water on the top of their mind. They just completed last night, in fact, their On the Road series. It was dormant for a couple of years because of COVID, but we did get back out this summer, and the board has been out on the road meeting constituents in their neighborhoods, which is great. And when we were up in Vallecito, especially about a month and a half ago, the conversation about water came up, because you look at the reservoirs, and you look at the Florida, and you look at the Animas, and you look at the flows on those rivers. It definitely is. I mean, you can see it. You can visually see what's going on. So the board has made it a priority. They've got land use regulations now that have been codified that clearly spell out what people need to do if they're going to do development. And they, it's tough for a board, because what tools do they have? What can they do to influence? Well, one of the tools that they have that goes a long way for anything is money. And so they do have some ARPA funds, and the board has indicated that they would be willing to use, before I say ARPA, let me define that. That's the American Rescue Plan Act. That's the federal stimulus dollars that are coming down in response to COVID to help local governments offset the impacts of the pandemic that we experienced over the last 2 years and continue to experience even today. So the American Rescue Plan Act dollars, the board has pledged money, and there's also the federal infrastructure bill that's out there. And the board has also expressed an interest in applying those infrastructure dollars to water infrastructure projects that align with their priorities, which essentially is, they want to help extend distribution systems and treatment systems to get water to more of the rural areas of the county. That's the bottom line. So they want to ensure that all residents of the county have safe, reliable drinking water. Okay, tough to do. It's going to be a tough hill to climb, but with money, the board is probably sick of hearing me say this, but with money, anything is possible, and that's almost always true. So they're putting their money where their mouth is, and if a project comes forward that aligns with the board's goals and will help to distribute and get water into residences, especially in the rural parts of the county, the board would definitely be interested in funding some project like that. I see Roy Horvath is on the call, and I know he's very active with the La Plata West Water Authority, which is one of those distributors that is trying to do exactly that, trying to distribute and get a water treatment and distribution network out to what we refer to as the dry side of the county. And so I know that La Plata West has a lot of plans. They've got some future service plans. And if they have projects, and they have approached the board with those projects, and the board is absolutely considering those. And just to be clear, I'm not saying that they're going to write checks based on my comments today, but they are absolutely considering those. Any projects that align with their goals, but especially those that are going to get safe, reliable drinking water into residences that are currently hauling water or don't have water at all. So that's where we are on water. There was also an ask there of affordable housing. Maybe I'll pause there and actually Gwen asked me this question before we started. Did I want to hold off questions to the end, or did I want to take questions as we go along? I'm more than happy to take questions, and if Gwen or Karen can help me field those questions in the chat as we go, I think it sets up a more conversational tone. So if you have a question, please just type it in the chat and I'll be more than happy to pause every few minutes and address those.
I'm not seeing anything in the chat with respect to what you just talked about.
So
Yeah.
Not seeing that, I will move along to affordable housing. So the board, bless you if you're a commissioner, because you've got to have capacity to have a lot of things on your mind, and you've got to be able to juggle a lot of things. So I think for all of the topics that you laid out for me today, I'm going to say this is definitely top of mind for the board. It is, okay? It absolutely is. Water absolutely is. But affordable housing, if there was a spotlight on any one single topic, this is it. I mean, in fact, Commissioner Porter Norton is not here today at this event because she's up at an affordable housing presentation that the state is putting on. The state's doing a roadshow right now, talking about a lot of the stimulus money and funds that are going to be available for housing projects. So what the board has done specifically over the last 6 months or so, actually even more than that, over the last year or so, first and foremost is they've recognized the issue. Okay, a lot of times it's hard to solve a problem if you don't clearly define it. Well, we've done that. We've clearly defined. There's been a number of studies, some recent studies done that have clearly defined the housing shortage in our community and in the region. Okay, so we absolutely know what the problem is. It's a lack of inventory, just to be clear. It's a lack of inventory. We don't have enough housing. But then you can narrow that down and you can really zoom into what kind of housing are we lacking. And the real answer is we're lacking all of it. Okay, what we're really lacking is affordable housing, workforce housing, and just regular middle income housing for people that in other communities can work jobs like teachers and firefighters and police officers. We don't have an inventory of stock available for folks at those income levels to be able to go out and buy something, and in many cases to even be able to go out and rent anything. So the board has referred to this as a crisis. I tend to agree with them. It is a problem. We know that there's a significant inventory shortage, depending on the studies that you're looking at. We're talking upwards of 500 or 600 units that we're short, and that's not something that's going to get fixed overnight. And so it's one of these problems that is absolutely on the board's radar. It's something that they're definitely thinking about, and I have to constantly remind them of what their role is, and their role as the county commissioners is what policies do you want to enact that are going to enable and facilitate development. Okay, because the county is not in the development business. We don't have a county housing department. So we're not going to go out and we're not going to start, doing vertical construction. You're not going to see us doing any dirt work anytime soon. That's not our role. Our role is what policies can we put in place that are going to facilitate and enable development of housing. So they've recognized the problem. They've tried to define the problem. They've worked closely with partnerships, whether it was the Region 9 or whether it was the Economic Development Alliance. And they've clearly have a clear understanding of what the issue is and the challenges. So that's something, again, that I think is instrumental to being able to solve any problem, is you got to know what it is you're solving for. So they've done that. So one of the things that they did about a year ago was they have reinvigorated the Regional Housing Authority. So there was a Regional Housing Authority, and it largely went dormant over the last few years for a number of different reasons. But the Regional Housing Authority has tools that they can use. And the board recognized that letting the Housing Authority remain in its dormancy was not a good strategy. And why not bring it back, get the local governments involved, and let's get unified around solving this problem. And so the Regional Housing Authority consists of La Plata County, City of Durango, Town of Bayfield, and Town of Ignacio. So we're bringing that back. They are currently in the process. They are advertising right now and recruiting for an interim director to come in and re-establish that entity administratively, establish the governance and get it back up and running. identify what its role is going to be, and then start identifying projects, because maybe the RHA plays that role of developer, or at least facilitates development. Because again, the county's not going to be in the development business. That's not what we see our role as being. Some of the things that we can do at the policy level that the board has already taken action on and has already done is they've established a revolving loan fund. Now, that was a little bit reactive, and maybe you read about it in the paper. Regardless of how we got there, we got there, and we're there now, and we have another tool in the toolbox, and that's the revolving loan fund. It came about because the West Side Mobile Home Park and the Triangle Mobile Home Park on Highway 160 West, these properties were going to be sold, and those residents were going to be displaced. And so, I said the problem is inventory, and that is a big chunk of the problem. But the other thing you don't want to do is you don't want to lose what you already have. And so, there were I don't remember the exact count, whether it was close to combined, probably close to 70 or 80 different units in those two parks that were potentially going to be displaced if those parks were sold and a new owner or developer came in and had a new vision for that property, or then or potentially raised the lot rents and price people out. I mean, there was a lot of things that could have happened, and the outcomes for many of those scenarios were going to be bad for those residents. So the county stepped in and worked with the residents of the mobile home parks and established the revolving loan fund and helped those residents purchase that land, so that they are now the owners of that land and they're paying off loans. So there was a loan that was made to them in the amount of $1.7 million in the case of West Side Mobile Home Park, so that they could buy that property and then they could remain in their homes as landowners. And that's a success story, absolutely. Let me pause there. I'll take a drink, and when you can let me know if there's any questions.
I don't see any, Chuck, but I'm curious as to what a developer might think are the impediments to building affordable housing in the county, and how can the county and the county commissioners do something to get around those impediments? I mean, what is it that's actually making it hard to build affordable housing?
Okay, and unfortunately, there's a lot of really good answers for that question, because they're all barriers that are going to have to be broken down. So where do we start? Let's just start with the impacts of COVID and supply chain issues, okay, and materials, and the cost of construction and the cost of skilled labor. Right now, if you're a developer, things just don't pencil out. I mean, that's just the reality. Things don't pencil out. I'm looking at, for construction problems in the county right now, these aren't housing projects. These are just construction projects that La Plata County as an organization are trying to undertake. We're seeing a 30% overrun on our budget, okay? That's pretty substantial. That means that the cost of materials, the cost of skilled labor, the cost to actually get vertical construction is costing us 30% more than what we anticipated in pre-COVID dollars, and even what we've anticipated in our budget. We're seeing cost overruns right now that, frankly, it's prohibitive. It's keeping us from doing some projects. We're actually tabling some projects because we're just going to wait and hope that there's a market correction. So that's the first thing that I'd tell you right now is pure economics. It just doesn't pencil out if you're a developer. Okay. What else? So you said housing in La Plata County. So if you're talking about housing in the unincorporated areas, there's a couple of significant barriers. There's infrastructure. So you need water, sewer, and access if you're going to have development. La Plata County and the unincorporated areas largely don't have centralized services. We don't have centralized water, sewer, and access that all come together in a certain area, where you could say, okay, let's draw a circle on the map and go, let's develop here. There's very, very few of those pieces of land out there. There are some, but they're just not, there's just not a lot of opportunities to do that. So then there's added cost to extend infrastructure. And then once again, now you're back into an economic scenario where, again, it just doesn't pencil out for developers. So, I mean, those are just some of the barriers that we're facing. if you can find a piece of land that is close to central water, sewer, and has a decent road nearby, that's probably a prime opportunity to look at developing that land. And so that's one of the things that we think the RHA could do is do that map analysis and do that scrub and find those opportunities. And then what role can local government play? And because now that gets back to the policy question. So what kinds of things could local government do to break down other barriers? So are there fees that we could reduce? Are there incentives that the board could put into place to incentivize development? Those kinds of things. So those are the policy questions that the board needs to grapple with. And we're actually going to have conversations on, they've already had conversations on that. We're going to continue to have conversations on that, as we go forward, because the board needs to put parameters around and establish those policies. And then as those properties are developed, or not developed, but identified, then maybe we can break down some of those barriers to development.
So we did have a question from Dick White. He asked, what's the status of La Posta Road development?
Okay, La Posta Road. Yeah, and that's a great area. And thank you, Dick, for that question, because I get that one a lot. And that one I'm so optimistic that we're on the cusp of some success stories there. So you probably know that the city of Durango is looking to annex down La Posta, and they've been in touch with the landowners out there, and I think people are generally supportive of that. And that process is great. Another thing that the city of Durango is doing and has done is they've established the Urban Renewal Authority, which will allow them, gives them another tool in the toolbox. They can potentially designate this area of La Posta once it's annexed as an urban renewal area, and then that could trigger some tax increment financing opportunities. Again, trying to create incentives for developers to come in. So that's one tool that could potentially be there. And then on the county side, what we've done, and I've done for the last 2 years, maybe 3, is the way the county budget works and the budget cycle works is, unlike the city, I don't have the ability to do a mid-year adjustment to my budget. If I'm going to spend money on something, I have to have a line item in my budget to do that. And so my budgeting cycle is about a 6-month process. And we started in June of every year, and then it gets adopted in December, and then it's implemented in January. And so a couple of years ago, we wanted to position the county to be ready and flexible to react if an opportunity presented itself at La Posta. So what are the barriers out at La Posta? Well, it always comes back to water, sewer, and access. So in La Posta, the 2 big barriers are the road and the sewer. Well, the county knows how to do roads, so there's potentially a role that we can play there because we know how to do roads, and that's one of our primary functions as a county is to build and maintain safe roads. And that's a very important distinction because the other real big barrier at La Posta is the sewer. And there is sewer nearby, but it's on the wrong side of the river. And so it needs to get either over the river or under the river or across the river, and then it can be extended down to the south. And that's going to come with a really big price tag. The challenge is that the county is not in the sewer business, and I don't have sewage services. So believe me, if it were as easy as writing a check to make it happen, I think this board and previous boards would have done that. We would have found a way to find the money, and we would have done that. We would have broken down that barrier. But we can't do that. But as I was saying about my budget, the board a couple of years ago allowed me to start putting money in the budget with a line item that says La Posta Road improvements. And I put it in 2 different spots in my budget, both under capital and one-time projects, one in my general fund capital and one in my road and bridge capital. And I've got $1 million in my general fund capital, and I've got $1.5 million in my road and bridge fund capital, that if at any point in the year an opportunity comes forward and it's a great idea and somebody says, okay, we can move on this, but we need money, county, we need you to write a check. Can you come to the table? we can say yes. Without having that built into my budget, we would say, we love the idea, give us a year, because I'm gonna have to budget for it. And we didn't want to have to do that. And so I think it was 2 years ago, we started putting that into the budget just as placeholders. The board's taken a little bit of heat over that, frankly, because there's a philosophy that budgets are supposed to be a spend plan, and that I should be able to report out every year that we were going to spend this much money, and we did this project, and we spent the money, and we were over under budget, or we are on time, or whatever the case may be. And I just got these in there as placeholders. And the board understands, the philosophy here is that we want to be able to be responsive and be flexible, and they've allowed me to do that. I've done it for the last 2 years, and I'm going to do it. I'm going to propose it to the board again this year, because I really feel like La Posta is on the cusp, given the work that the city of Durango is doing with annexation and with the URA. So I think La Posta hopefully is something that we're going to be talking about here in the next 12 to 18 months, with a very different lens.
Okay, Chuck, we've got a question from Denise. She says, how do you reconcile the need for more / affordable housing with aridification of the Southwest?
Yeah, okay, and that's a great question. And that's where I really rely on the experts from our water community, because it is a finite resource, right? And so how do we make sure that we're being wise and responsible as we encourage and improve and approve development projects? But that's where the board's priorities come into play. That's where the land use code and the quantification of the water standards come into play. And that's where having to prove legal rights and, depending on the size and scope of the project, that's where sometimes having to prove and do a pump test or a well test comes into play. Because someone comes in and says, yeah, okay, we're going to do a development here of 12 units, and we're going to do a commercial well on the site, and it's going to service it. The last thing the board wants to do is approve a development of that nature, only to have the well go dry. And we have seen wells go dry across the county, in various areas across the county over the last few years. And so they don't ever want to do that. And so it puts the board in a tough position, Denise, because on the one hand, we know affordable housing is a dire need. I said it was a crisis. The board has said it's a crisis, and we need housing. Okay. Sometimes the board might have to look at a development project, whether it's 1, 2, or 5 units. And if that applicant comes forward and they can't prove legal access, or they can't prove the well test, if it's going to be off of a well, that project's not going to move forward. And it really does put the board in a tough position. And it's also tough because, again, right now things aren't things are not penciling out for developers. And when they open our code and it says, wait a minute, I'm going to have to do a well test, that's expensive. I'm going to have to do a geological survey to prove water, groundwater. That's expensive. You guys are killing development. We hear it all the time. You guys are killing development. You should waive that requirement. Well, if the board does that, and then we build 12 houses or 15 houses, and then you put people into it, and now that well goes dry, what are the consequences of that? So it's tough, and I get it. And, I'm so thankful that we have people who want to stand up and be elected officials who make these tough decisions, because it's hard to be elected. And that's just a great example of sometimes they're caught in a pincer. And that's a great example of it. Is we want development, we want to approve it, but at the same time, we know water is a finite resource, and we're going to make you pay money up front to prove it. And sometimes we're going to make you do a well test to prove it as well.
I think you can move on to the next topic, Chuck.
Okay, great. Let me scroll up on my chat. So we talked about water, we talked about homeless. Strategic plan, great question. Who asked that? Roy. Believe it or not, tomorrow is the next step. So one of the things that La Plata County is really taking an interest in this year especially. It started about 2 years ago, but that's our diversity, equity, and inclusion. We've stood up an employee-led team, and we want our organization to be mindful in all that we do, and be thoughtful and recognize all residents of the county and our employees. So it started internally focused, our DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion. And we've done some things there internal to the organization that I'm happy to talk about as well. But outwardly, one of the things that we're doing, and especially as it relates to the strategic plan, is we're trying to be more inclusive with our Spanish speaking residents. And there are a number of them. Westside Mobile Home Park, for example, when we took public comment on Westside Mobile Home Park, we offered simultaneous interpretation at that board meeting. And I think it was the first time that we've done that at La Plata County. And it was powerful. And if you happened to tune into the board meeting that day, I can tell you it was a very powerful board meeting for something as some of those board meetings, I'm in all of them, and some are more exciting than others. I'll just put it that way. But this was truly a moving experience, because to have those folks show up and speak in their native language and speak to the policymakers, your board of county commissioners, and have their voice heard was incredibly powerful. Now, how this relates to the strategic plan, we wanted to update our strategic plan. We went out on the road, a couple of different venues. I know the team went out to Breen. I was absent that day. I actually was meeting with the Farm Bureau with Commissioner Porter Norton out on the southeast side. So I missed that meeting. We hosted a meeting here. We've been taking input, but we didn't want to exclude our Spanish speaking residents at all. And so we got a little bogged down because the company that we were using to provide that interpretation for us became a little bit unresponsive. And so we had some meetings scheduled and we had to cancel them. And I'm very happy to say that tomorrow, August 3rd, and I don't know the time exactly, it might be 5:30 or 6 in the evening, we're hosting a Spanish speaking conversation on the strategic plan to get input from our Spanish speaking residents. So that's where we are on that. Other than that, we've been in communication with the board. We've received their guidance and direction about what we're getting, the feedback that we're getting from the community, and what the pillars of our strategic plan are going to be. And then as soon as we get a closeout, getting the Spanish speaking input, we'll have the meeting tomorrow. We'll probably give them a couple of weeks to give us feedback. Then we'll try to get a draft put together, get it back in front of the board, and we'll present that at a board discussion time. Board discussion times occur on Wednesday mornings. Every Wednesday, it's a standing meeting. Those are public. We're doing them hybrid, so the board will sit in the boardroom, but we're broadcasting them on Zoom, so people can always just dial in and watch those. So that's where we are. We think we're getting close. We've gotten great feedback so far. We've got a draft of what we think it's going to look like, and we are hosting a Spanish speaking public meeting tomorrow on that topic.
Okay, I don't see any questions on that. And I think the next topic in the chat was radar.
Okay. Sadly, as of yesterday morning, I got a little bit of a setback on the radar. So let's don't start with the negative. Let me start with the positives. Okay. Let me give the background and the history of the radar. So we had a fire in 2018. It was called the 416 fire. It identified a need. There's a phenomenon after a wildland fire of that nature. It's called flood after fire. And what that is sometimes when a fire at that size and scope goes through the landscape, it actually changes the soil composition. And in some cases, if it burns hot enough, it can actually turn the sand into glass-like. And so the soil will not absorb water. Okay, so now the vegetation has been burned out, and now the soil won't absorb water. So even the smallest amount of rainfall can result in flooding. And we saw that. We saw that in July of 2018, on the 17th of July, and then again on the 24th, we had our first two flooding events below the burn scar up in the valley. The State Department of Homeland Security Office of Emergency Management, recognizing the risk of flooding and the risk that it put our residents in, paid for a mobile radar unit to come into La Plata County and operate for 90 days to give us the ability to do some forecasting in order to do some early warning notification if there was potential for flash flooding. They paid for that in 2018. They paid for it again in 2019. In 2019, in January, the Department of Local Affairs awarded La Plata County a grant in the amount of $1.7 million to go out and purchase, operate, install, and maintain a permanent regional weather radar system for this region. And that was huge. Okay, that was huge, because the challenge that we face in the Four Corners, and in fact, it was actually demonstrated very clearly this weekend when the Grand Junction radar went down. The radar coverage for La Plata County originates in Grand Junction and Albuquerque and a little bit from Flagstaff. And so think about where those cities are and how far away they are from where we are. Well, the beams of their radar, by the time it gets to La Plata County and the Four Corners region, their beams are at about 24 to 26,000 feet. Okay, so all of you live here, you know, how many times have we seen weather systems and storm cells form right in the peaks of the Levatas, right in that 12 to 16,000 foot range. Okay, that's well below the existing radar coverage that we're seeing. So a lot of times we'll have weather events here on the ground that the National Weather Service won't even be aware of. Okay, now they do a great job with the tools that they have, and they give us alerts all the time. In fact, a couple of weeks ago, I got an email directly from the National Severe Storms Laboratory that said, "Hey, Chuck, I'm looking at the radar and you guys are going to get hammered this weekend. You need to let your people know." I mean, that's pretty cool that they do that, but it's pretty scary that they have to do that for us. The reason they have my email, though, is because we've been working with them so closely on this regional weather radar project. So we got the money. So the next thing that we had to do is identify a location. And talk about being naive, man. I thought this was going to be easy. I thought I've got $1.7 million, and I asked the Board of County Commissioners at one point, just knowing cost overruns and whatnot, I said, La Plata County needs to put some money on the table too. We've got to have skin in the game on this. So the county has budgeted $400,000 of general fund dollars for this project as well. So we have $2.1 million in the budget. That's a lot of money. We can get a lot of things done. And I thought this is going to be a slam dunk. We're going to get this done. Well, that was in 2019, right? And here we are in 2022, and we still don't have a radar, because the next challenge you face is where are you going to put this radar? And it needs to be up high, and it needs to be on a mountaintop. And it's like, great, we live in La Plata County. We've got no shortage of mountaintops. Go find one. The problem is every mountaintop you look at, each has their own challenges. And it proved to be incredibly difficult. So you'd find a great mountaintop, and we'd send the lat long off to our friends at the National Severe Storms Laboratory. We'd ask them to run a 3D model on the site. They would do that. Then they'd come back to us and they'd tell us yes or no whether they think it would work. If it looked like the model was going to be good, then we had to go, okay, does it have a road? Can you get to the top of that mountain? Yes or no? If no, then what's it going to take to get a road? How many private properties are we going to have to cross? What's it going to take to cut a road into that? Is it even possible? Is there power? Radar needs power. It's going to, can we get power up to it? And ideally, it needs three-phase power. Here's what I learned about three-phase power. It costs 3 times as much as single phase. That's what I know about three-phase power. Okay, so everything is expensive, and then it needs fiber. It needs telecommunications for the long haul. You can get away with a wireless connection to start, but at the end of the day, you need a fiber connection. So we looked for years, and we would enter into negotiations with landowners, both public agency landowners and private landowners. And we would, some mountaintops, we just couldn't come to terms with the landowner, whether it was a governmental entity or whether it was a private owner. Some mountaintops, we just couldn't make it pencil out. I mean, one particular mountaintop had great radar modeling, and we thought it was going to be great, but I was going to spend upwards of $1.5 million to get power to it. Well, that was only going to leave me with, $500,000 to buy the unit. And that wasn't going to work. So we searched long and hard, and we finally landed on a site that was going to work, that we could make the radar modeling work, given the tower height that we would need to construct. and that was at the La Plata County Airport. And so that was a big win for us. And we got that approved earlier this year in 2022. And then we went out to RFP. We did a request for proposals to solicit vendors to come out and give us their proposals on a solution on that location. We got those proposals in. That closed it closed on July 13th, and we reviewed the proposals. We had one viable candidate, and then we sent it off to our experts. Again, nobody in La Plata County is a radar expert, and we sent it off to the National Severe Storms Laboratory. And unfortunately, it looks like we're going to have to reject that offer, and we're going to have to go back out to RFP to solicit more bids. So a bit of a setback, but at the end of the day, we've got a project that is funded, and we've got a project that has a site now, and we're going to have to go out to bid and see if we can't get some different proposals in. So that's the update on the radar. Let me pause there to see if any questions come in.
So it's not a question, but Barbara Day said, I was living in that area where the burn scar flooding and mudslides happened the next season following the 416 fire. It was a comfort to see the earth moving equipment nearby during the next flood debris warning. But I appreciate all the obstacles you're listing as obstacles. I guess the radar systems can't be done with satellite technology, ?
No, I don't think the satellites could give us the granularity that we need. I think the ground-based units are just the way to go. And again, not being a radar expert and relying on the folks from NOAA and the National Severe Storms Laboratory, they're telling us exactly what's going to provide the best coverage for this region. And I keep saying region, and I think that's important because, La Plata County is going to take lead on this, and we're going to get it done, and we are going to get it done. Okay, let me just be clear on that. We're going to get it done. But it's going to benefit everybody because it's the Four Corner region that is this black hole in coverage. And so we're going to plug in and we're going to tie into what's referred to as the National Weather System's National Mosaic. And it's going to provide so much more accuracy and fidelity of data across the region that so many people are going to benefit from, that I just don't think the satellite-based systems can even come close to matching right now. And it's not just about being able to pick up your phone and open an app to see what the temperature is going to be tomorrow. As I've learned about radar, that is the least of its capabilities. And I mean that. The ability to look at the forecast for the next 3 days and know whether or not I need to take an umbrella, that is the least of the capabilities. When it's important to a stakeholder group when they come to you and offer money without even being asked. Okay, but that's exactly what happened here. The water conservancy districts came to La Plata County and said, hey, when you get that radar, sign us up. We're ready. We want to participate. We want to contribute to funding the operations and maintenance of that system. We want to contribute to funding. Think about that. Let that land for a second, because what's their angle, right? What's their interest? Well, as I've learned about radar, you're probably all familiar with the SNOTEL meters, that are scattered about. They're physical devices that are up in the watershed, and they measure the snowfall. The radar unit can simulate at an order of magnitude, something like 10,000 to 1 ratio of those SNOTEL monitors, but in a 360-degree view. So the radar can see into the clouds. It can see how much water is in the clouds. It can see how much precipitation fell and where it fell on the rate, and how much water actually, made it to the ground that ended up into the river. And it's important for the conservancy districts because they have to go off of estimates for what we owe downstream users, according to the water compact and according to all the water laws that are in place in the Southwest. And we know those estimates aren't accurate. So bringing in a weather radar system it's going to bring the detail and the granularity and the fidelity of that information back. It's going to raise it to an exponential level. So they're super interested in getting this thing up and running. In fact, when we were trying to decide on the sites, first when we thought we had a good site for all of the other reasons, it modeled well, it had a road, it had power and it had fiber nearby that we could get to the airport. I presented it to the Board of County Commissioners, but before I did that, I presented it to the stakeholder group that we had formed, people that were interested in the radar system, and that included the water conservancy districts, because I absolutely wanted them to be on board before I presented it to the board publicly. Because if the water conservancy districts weren't going to back that site or be supportive of it, we would have had internal conflict within the county. We didn't want that. So thankfully, they were unanimously in support of that site.
And that the site at the airport is enough elevation to really work well.
Yeah, there is a little bit of shadowing. If you're familiar with Black Ridge to the western part of our county, that's probably the highest point in the southern portion of the county. So there is a little bit of shadowing directly west of the airport where the signals get interrupted by Black Ridge, but to the southwest, which is where a lot of our weather forms and moves into our region, very clear coverage. And then into the La Plata Mountains, because don't forget, the original purpose of this system was for early warning and notification of people below the burn scar. So looking to the north into the La Platas and seeing above the peaks, it gives us good coverage there. So in the two areas where we really needed to make sure that we had the best coverage, we found really good coverage. Now there were other sites in the county that were better. But at the end of the day, we had to balance great radar coverage with a road, with power and fiber. We had to strike that balance. So we think we've got really good coverage, but we have a road and power and fiber. So it makes it a win for us.
And Karen asks if there's any money available from DOT or the FAA, for this kind of thing. I don't know how much it would really help aircraft, but
yeah,
ask if you talk to those agencies.
Yeah, absolutely. And the airport is definitely one of those stakeholder groups that I'm going to be knocking on Tony McCary's door once we get this thing up and running. Now he's being gracious enough to work with us and find land at the airport that we're going to be able to use. And he has been phenomenal to work with. So, but yeah, absolutely. That ground-based unit is going to help with wind shear, especially. That's a benefit. So yeah, the airport is definitely excited and they see benefit to having that unit co-located there at the airport as well.
Okay, I think that's it for questions on that. And I think the next thing was the homeless camp.
Okay, and then Gwen, just as a time check, how much time do I have with you and how am I doing on time?
I think we're fine, Chuck.
Okay, great.
We typically try never to go more than an hour and a half, and we're at about 55 minutes. So.
Okay, great. So homeless. All right. Wow. Talk about a tough nut to crack. This one has been a challenge for our community for at least the 7 years that I've been working with the Plata County. And really this chapter of addressing impacts of homelessness on our community really starts in 2015 when Sheriff Smith was elected and took office as the sheriff. We have had homelessness in the Plata County and in the city of Durango for years, but it's been a little bit invisible. It's been out of sight. It's been out of mind. But it has moved around in the mountains around, primarily around the city of Durango. What happened in 2015 is that the sheriff, being well read and looking at case law from across the country, noticed that in Boise, Idaho, there was a ruling by the Ninth Circuit that said, law enforcement, you can't give move along orders if there's nowhere to move along to. Human beings have a right to sleep. It's not even a right. It's a necessity of life, and you can't deny that. People have to have a place to go. And with that in mind, it kind of set the context for the conversations that have followed over the last few years. And that primarily is that the homeless community kind of picked the area behind the tech center, so directly west of Alameda Court, up into the west, and then to the north of the tech center. If you go to the transfer station, the city of Durango transfer station, if you were just to drive all the way to the end of that road, there's a gate. And then in the mountains up there, where the mountain bike trail system is over in Park, the homeless community just started camping out there, really just dispersed camping, which comes with a lot of risk, fire risk first and foremost. And the problems that arose from that, though, were that Manna Soup Kitchen and the City of Durango Social Services campus is adjacent to some of the West Side neighborhoods. So you've got Manna, you've got the VOA shelter, you've got the Hilltop House, and now you have a Sparrow. So you have the city's social services campus kind of clustered in that little area. You've got dispersed campers directly above that in the mountains. And unfortunately for the residents of those West Side neighborhoods, the shortest distance from the woods to the services were the neighborhoods and the neighborhood streets. And so in 2015, 16, and 17, especially, not so much the county, City of Durango really started getting a lot of pressure from residents about negative neighborhood impacts. And they were totally legit. I mean, there were some horrific experiences that those neighbors lived through, those residents in those neighborhoods, horrible and unacceptable. The problem was they were kind of caught in the middle of two law enforcement agencies kind of pointing fingers at each other, which is, City of Durango's police saying, you can't be here, move along, and the sheriff saying, I can't tell people that because they have to have a place to go. So I am not going to enforce the no camping ordinance up at the tech center. So city started saying, Sheriff, please get the campers off of the tech center. And the sheriff's like, I can't until we have a place to go. And that really is the question. And it remains the question today on August 2nd of 2022. Because here we are. So, and again, back to the 416 fire. So we had dispersed camping. We had negative, horrible impacts on the neighborhoods. We had nowhere for people to go, no ability for law enforcement to be able to enforce. But we had the fire, and then it became a risk. We couldn't allow the campers to stay at the tech center. So we asked the campers to evacuate. There was a Red Cross shelter that was established at Escalante Middle School. It was actually in the gymnasium of the middle school, but interestingly enough, we evacuated the homeless population, and we helped them move down to Escalante. But the majority, I'll stop short of saying 100%, but it was pretty darn close to 100% of the homeless community refused to go into the shelter proper, into the gymnasium, but they camped on the grass behind Escalante. As that began to wind down on August 24th of 2018, City of Durango opened up space near the Greenmont Cemetery on a property, what is being referred to as the Elkview property, city-owned land, and they allowed for I'm sorry, not on August 24th. At probably mid-July, the city opened that up as a place for the homeless community to go and to camp. But they had some rules. They had the rules around you had to be able to take your tent up, and you had to take it down during the day. You had to, there were some rules around that, and it didn't work very well. And on August 24th, the city shut that camp and closed it down. So that was August 24th of 2018. So now we were right back where we were. We didn't have a place where the homeless community could go. Right around that time, law enforcement, the sheriff's office started receiving our first resident complaints about camping at Purple Cliffs. And that's where the homeless community kind of self-selected where they were going to go. In the fall of 2018, the Board of County Commissioners made a decision and directed county staff to not enforce the no camping ordinance in order to allow the homeless community to camp at Purple Cliffs on a temporary basis in order to survive the winter. Because we were in a bit of a conundrum where the city of Durango was saying, okay, you can camp, but you got to take your tent down when the sun comes up. You can put it up at night, but you got to take it down during the day. And that doesn't work for a couple of reasons. One, because you can't survive a La Plata County winter if you can't winterize and insulate your tent. And you can't winterize and insulate your tent if you're taking it down and putting it up every day. So that pragmatically doesn't work. And then also, at the time, we had a pretty good relationship with that community. We knew we had people that worked the midnight shift. We knew we had people that were working overnight that needed to sleep during the day. And so that didn't work. So that was a problem. And so really, as a humanitarian response, the board said, we're going to allow this camping to occur at Purple Cliffs in order to allow us to buy time over the winter to identify a site where we can allow camping to occur, but in a more organized and in managed fashion. Well, that was the fall of 2018, and here we are in August 2022, and for no lack of effort, no lack of trying, we've yet to find the where. Where can people go? Meanwhile, the conditions at Purple Glyphs have really deteriorated. And anybody who has driven on the Poster Road, if you go to Walmart and look across the river and look up into the mountains of Purple Cliffs and you see what's going on out there, pretty horrific conditions, really bad. And this is county land. I mean, we are entrusted as county staff, to be good stewards of that land. And right now, frankly, we're not being good stewards. There's no wastewater disposal out there. There's no potable water out there. It has to be hauled in. It's the place is trashed. There's pedestrian risk. There's no sidewalks. There's no where for people to walk on the Poster Road. We have environmental concerns. It's just a bad situation. And over the years, it has gotten exponentially worse. It is really bad out there right now. And the board has said we can't continue to allow this to happen. And so a couple of months ago, the board, did an open letter to the community that said we can't continue to be stuck in conversations where nothing gets done. And meanwhile, every fall, it seems like well, we didn't find a solution. So one more year at Purple Cliffs, one more year. And so the board said we can't do that. And Purple Cliffs is going to close on September 30th. And so that's what we're doing is we're closing Purple Cliffs. On October 1st of this year, we will begin enforcing the no camping regulations across all county properties, whether that is the tech center or whether it's Purple Cliffs or anywhere else where the county owns land, and we're going to enforce it. And so we're trying to do this in as a compassionate way as possible. We want to be trauma informed. What we're going to do right now is we are going to triage, essentially. We're working with Manna Soup Kitchen. They received the contract to establish the navigation center, which they've done, and they've done a great job at that. One of the components, as the entity that was awarded that in conjunction with our strategic plan to address homelessness, as the implementer of that, one of those functions was to do street outreach. So we've asked them to expand that street outreach program in order to help us do some triage of the campers. So hopefully very, very soon, they're going to be able to staff up, get some people on hand, and we're going to go out there and do one-on-one interviews with all of the campers, not just a tally count that Nina just conducted, which is very informative. In fact, just a shameless plug for them. They're having a community meeting tomorrow at 5:30 on Zoom. You have to sign up in advance, go to their website, the Nina website, and you can see a presentation on their tally count. But this is going to go a little bit deeper, trying to find out what exactly is your trauma, if you're willing to share that. And we know that's going to be a tough ask because people right now don't trust us, and we know that. but we're going to go out there. We're going to try and connect one-on-one because we want to be able to prioritize families, children. We know that there are upwards of, at any given time, we've heard counts as high as 7 families and 20 children out there. I heard last week at one of my homeless meetings that we've got 2 pregnant women out there, 2 that have recently given birth within the last month, and 2 additional pregnant women out there. So we want to prioritize and try to connect people to services where they exist if they're willing to take advantage of those services. And that, again, that's why this is really a tough problem, because sometimes services exist and sometimes a solution is available, but the person doesn't want it. And so, being homeless is not a crime, but that doesn't mean that you get to dictate where you're going to go either. And we've allowed that to happen because we allowed it to happen at the tech center. And then we allowed it to happen when the cemetery site closed and the homeless community self-selected Purple Cliffs. Okay, it's not a good site and it's got to close. So it's not illegal to be homeless, and we're not going to criminalize homelessness, but that doesn't mean that you don't have to be law abiding and that you get to choose where you're going to go. So right now, the city of Durango does have an ordinance that say you can camp in the parks, but you just got to take your tent down every day. And so if we connect with you and try to offer you services and try to connect you with a solution, and you choose not to take it, that's beyond our control. But we're going to do everything we can to do this, again, in as compassionate a way, in a trauma-informed way as we possibly can. I'll pause there. I'm sure there are questions.
So we have a question from Dick White. He said, what happened to the idea of using state land above Boda? When I read that suggestion, I thought it might be an optimal site.
Yeah, that didn't pan out for a number of reasons. And there were some pretty significant reasons too. First and foremost, the state was not willing to let that land be used for that purpose. And then there was also some concerns with some existing treaty language and where that property was actually located, and concerns that it might not have been aligned with some pretty old treaties between the federal government and the Southern Ute Indian tribe. So it looked good on paper, but as soon as the deeper analysis started on that, that one quickly became apparent that it wasn't going to work.
Okay, I don't see any more questions. I know that Karen has put a few links in the chat window, and we'll try to get the transcript of that sent out. She did just put something in, said, can you tell us how to find info on tomorrow's public meeting for Spanish-speaking residents?
Yes, let me.
It's kind of asking where
I don't know if it is not city council, so it's the county that's doing it. So I don't know if I have your email address, but maybe I can send it over to Gwen after this meeting, because I don't want to break out of this moment to go to my own website to see if I can find it. So I know the right person to ask, and I can get that as soon as okay, I see you. I'll just take a picture of your email address real quick. I'll give it to you right after this meeting.
Thank you. I'd like to share it with Westside, and I don't know if they're advised. They might already know about it, but
I hope that they do. We did do a press release in Spanish last week. So, we are trying to communicate as best we can.
all right.
Okay, Karen, I don't see any more questions.
Okay, I want to thank you very much. Let's give a big virtual round of applause to Chuck. That was so much information.
All right. Well, you're very welcome.
But it's all stuff we really need to live in this county. And before everybody leaves, I want you to scroll all the way up to the top of the chat. By the way, I will save the chat, which I'll do right now. Tonight at 6 o'clock, Congressional District 3 kickoff. It's a Zoom, and you can register at the link I put at the very top of the chat, mobilize.us. And then the next announcement is the La Plata Dems are having the Roosevelt's Gala. That's our big fundraiser for the year. August 26th at 5:30, and you can get your ticket at that link. And the next club lunch is September 6th at noon. And we'll watch out for any emails you'll be getting about the next lunch. Does anyone else have any announcements that I haven't mentioned? Oh,
I'm gonna
Roy
drop off.
Harbaugh.
It looks like you guys are gonna start talking party business, so I'm gonna drop. Thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity, and I look forward to doing it in person next time. I hope so.
thank you so much,
Thank you.
Chuck. Oh. We got a question from Roy Horvath about the caucus process. Did the resolution pass to do away with in-person caucuses? Well, I don't know if you are better known about that, but the answer is no, I don't think. I think, yeah, we in La Plata County said, no, we don't want them. And a lot of other counties did, but I think statewide, we still have them. And do you have anything on that?
I was just going to confirm that nothing has happened further with that petition. It has been signed by about 120 party leaders and elected officials around the state. We need more Republicans to join us, with also concurring that it is a waste of time and not democratic. Unfortunately, nobody had the bandwidth during caucus and assembly to do it when everybody was really pissed off about it. And afterwards, people have moved on to different things. If anyone has ideas on how to push it during an election year when people are busy, but no one wants caucus and assembly to continue forward, or many don't, I would appreciate hearing them. Thanks.
All right, I guess that's it for tonight. Do you have anything to add, Gwen? Thank you for your service as the club chair all this time.
And thank you for stepping up.
Thank you both.
And tonight at 6, again, tonight at 6 is the Congressional District 3 kickoff. And that should be a big deal. We all need to really push for our district to get new representation. So thank you all for coming.